Now, the following interview may contain some content that parents or guardians may find inappropriate for younger children. Parental guidance is definitely advised. Now, the indomitable Dr. Tlaleng Mofokeng, affectionately known as Dr. T, is passionate about making sexual health and well-being services available to all, regardless of their sexual and gender identities or their economic status. She's launched her much-anticipated book, A Guide to Sexual Health and Pleasure. Now, this book is filled with the specifics of sexual anatomy and health, as well as advice and facts about pleasure and sexual rights. She joins me now this morning on more for her book. Now, a very good morning to you, Dr. T. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
I have a feeling we've got to have a great conversation about this topic. You know, Dr. T, this book is, I think we need to make it clear that this is not a how to have sex manual, but rather a guide on how to navigate around issues of sexuality.
Precisely. It is a medical book. It's a guide specifically because I cover a range of issues from medical conditions in the first chapter of the book, ranging from, polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis, fibroids. There's a whole chapter dedicated just for pregnancy. And of course, importantly, is how do chronic illnesses affect your sexuality? How do they affect your sexual pleasure? So hypertension, diabetes, epilepsy, depression. And in the second part of the book, that's where the pleasure section is, where I go more into detail in terms of what is consent, right, for sexual content, why is communication important in relationships, and of course, again, bringing the pleasure element back into sexual health and well-being.
And you start off by highlighting how at some point you're often followed to your car after a session with people wanting more information, wanting more details over health and sexual health. I mean, what makes you think you are the voice of safe sex?
I think at the time it was during my community service years. I was much younger, and so I think I looked like the young people that used to come to the clinics during the 2010 World Cup fever. You remember the football Fridays?
Oh,
so
yes.
we'd all be in sneakers and jeans to mark, the events. And I think, I just blended in. I used the same slang, the same lingo as the young people in the clinics, and they just sort of naturally gravitated towards me. And I think because they just thought maybe I could, be more relatable. And that's when it dawned on me that, when I'm leaving the clinic, what's going to happen to these young people? Who are they going to be asking all the questions around, how to break up with my boyfriend, how to use a condom, what is a lubricant, and that's why the book was inspired. But before the book, the radio happened, the TV happened, where then I was starting to speak openly about sex, sexuality, and rights.
In most African homes, the issue of sex and sexual health and sexual pleasure are often a cliche topic to talk about. But then with you, your mom just spoke so openly about it from the word go. Why do you think this is the case, though?
I think it was so important, and funny enough, I only realized that when I went to boarding school, that in fact the information I have far surpasses what my peers had at the time. And I could put it back to my mom because of how she used to speak about me and my body, how she used to affirm the fact that this is my body and I have rights to do what I please with my body. And I think the talk, parents often want to have the talk. And I say to them often that have an open communication with your children. Make sure that children can trust you with information that you are giving them. When you don't know, rather say so and help them together with them to find, the right information. And don't lie as parents to your children, and be open, and ask them, because by the time they ask you, how are babies made? They kind of already know. So, it's up to you.
Believe me, these kids of today, they know, eh?
Yeah, they kind of already know. So I think it's just an affirmation of ongoing communication. And then I think that's what my mother got right, is that there was a point where I was a teenager, I knew I could trust her with certain information and she wouldn't judge me, and her love was unconditional.
Dr. T, if I were to approach you and go straight to your office and I would like to open up to you about sexual health and sexual pleasure, how do you make men more, how do you make men open up to you? Especially strange men that we've never met before.
Men don't actually have a problem with that. I think men's, concerns are very much around performance, how many rounds, and whether they can maintain a strong enough erection. Women, on the other hand, are often policed and judged for even thinking about sex, for even wanting to have sex. And I find that those consultations with women tend to take longer, just to get them to really accept the fact that they are two sexual beings. And so at the practice, we are, a women's health clinic, but we do assist men because women are having sex with someone, right? So we do, open up our space for consultations for a range of people, abled people, people with spinal injuries, for example, from by accident. So our practice is really comprehensive. We help everybody, but it's interesting because men always tend to have very specific issues within a very narrow spectrum. And what we try to do, as with women, is give people a guide for each reproductive decade or where they are, to say, if you're in your 20s, look out for this. If you're in your 30s, this is why this type of screening is important, like Pap smear, breast self-exam, which men should also be doing. But more importantly, let's create affirming spaces for women. It's Women's Month, right? And let's make sure that all women cannot be judged or policed for making certain decisions about their body.
And I like it when you say that, this book is not only targeting a specific gender, but it is inclusive.
It is, because I've worked with a lot of transgender women who struggle to get hormonal therapy to help them with their transitioning process. I work a lot with sex workers who can't go to clinics for condoms, for HIV testing and screening because of the stigma and judgment that comes with their work. I also work with a lot of younger women who still feel that the options of contraception at local clinics is still not enough. So when they get there, they really only have one choice, either a very high dose pill or an injection. And they're already feeling like, but there should be more. My lifestyle requires more options, and I need more, assistance in terms of post-rape or post-sexual assault assistance. So there's a lot of emotional and mental health that goes with sexual well-being too, that we are neglecting at the moment.
And I'm sure you know by now how difficult it is for men to open up about their sexuality and about their sexual performance. It is often said that men have got a very fragile ego. They can be attacked physically, emotionally, but don't touch on their ego, especially when it comes to sex and sexuality and sexual performance. I may be wrong, but which gender is more inquisitive, is more open to these kinds of conversations?
Sexual pleasure is a human experience, and everyone is inquisitive about it. The difference is that men don't get judged for being inquisitive. They get brownie points for being macho, for having this masculinity identity that's very tied to their penis and sexual performance. And that's what the problem is. And then a penis tends to be a weapon now, where people have to prove their masculinity, but their sexual performance. Whether there's consent or not, people feel that if you say no to me now, for heaven's sakes, it means there's something wrong with my personality, my masculinity, my ego, and therefore I will forcefully have sex with you, violate you, and rape you. And that's the problem, is how men are tying sexual performance to ego. And I hope with this book we can normalize healthy sexual behavior, we can normalize healthy sexual identity and self-esteem that's not tied to what you do to other people with sex, but more with your own inner self-development and identity and affirmation of your own rights first. Respect yourself first and respect the next person. I think it's very basic, because without consent, without respect for other people's body, there is no pleasure.
Right. I definitely think that we need a follow-up interview to this, because you need more time. We don't have much time, unfortunately. And just before I let you go, we literally have 10 seconds. You have been appointed as Gender Commission of Equality. I know it's only been a few days, but how has that been for you personally?
For me, it feels like a natural step of things. I'm ready for this job, and I'm quite happy to be appointed commissioner and really take the fight on for a gender more equal society.
All right. Dr. T, my favorite doctor. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, Dr. T, with her typically honest and warm approach to issues, makes the reader feel comfortable reading about topics that are not always discussed freely, providing all the information that explains sex and sexuality in a way that is quite entertaining and enlightening, I must say. She just spoke to us about her book, A Guide to Sexual Health and Pleasure. Well, if you also belong to a book club or a lone reader, you can also join us for a Sunday morning book feature to talk about some of the books that you're currently reading or have read. Simply send us a detailed description of your book club, on email. You can also send us a picture of those books with a brief caption using our social media platforms. You can use our Twitter handle at @MorningLiveSABC or #MorningLiveSABC. You can also tag or send us a Facebook message via our page, MorningLiveSABC. And for our email address, it's morninglive@sabc.co.za.